Hello, everyone. Good morning from Los Angeles. Good evening where you are. I am so happy today to walk you through the application of Wharton with an expert. So Scott is here with us, and I'm so happy and honored to have you today, Scott. And, so I want to give you the mic to introduce yourself, Scott.
Great. Well, Dalal and GMAT Club, thank you so much for having me here and for kind of assisting today to talk through everything. So hello, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Edinburgh. I'm the founder of Personal MBA Coach. I went to MIT for undergrad, worked in consulting for a few years and went to Wharton for my MBA. I've been running Personal MBA Coach for just over 15 years, and we help applicants from around the world to get into top business schools. On the board for AGAC, the Association of Graduate Admissions Consultants. Have been a speaker at the GMAT conference. Just got back today from a talk I gave in London over the weekend. We do everything throughout the process from GMAT, GRE tutoring, essay work, application consulting, interview prep. We send a lot of people to Wharton every year, so that's definitely a big specialty for us. And we'll give you a whole pitch today, but excited to talk through the application here.
Very happy to have you, Scott. I've always admired you and admired your work, and you're a big inspiration to many people. So very, very happy to have you today. So I'm Dalal. I'm your GMAT Club moderator today. I'm an incoming MMM student at Kellogg. And the focus today is to really just walk you through the application of Wharton and just kind of really answering your questions at the end of the session, if we have time. And of course, today we're not going to be doing any essay review or anything like that. If you have very specific advice, you can, of course, reach out to Personal MBA Coach. But here today, we're here to give you kind of a general idea of what the Wharton MBA application looks like. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen. We have the application over here. Now, let's start off, Scott. Maybe you can kind of just tell us a little bit about when you start your application. Would you rather use your personal email address or your work email address? I know a lot of people say that maybe I don't want to use my personal email address because it doesn't make me look professional. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, no, great question. So, to be honest, it doesn't matter. Believe it or not, you just want to pick one email address that's going to make sense for you, an email address that you're going to be able to check regularly, where emails aren't going to go to spam. Other little things to think about that are, kind of related to this topic is what your presence is, right? So sometimes I see an email address and it does not have to be like my email address might be like first name dot last name. It does not have to be that, but what is in the email address? Is that something that you would want to present to admissions directors? And some people have different texts and different words. So if it's too casual, maybe create a new email address that feels a little bit more professional. And then other things to think about, which not to veer off topic, but it's sort of related to this idea is your overall presence. Sometimes I see folks have email addresses that are all in capitals, or their name is a little bit different in the email than their real name, or the text in your sort of formatted email is like weirdly formatted, and somebody might email you and you might email back. So just think about your overall professional presence. I think the more standard you can make it with your name and the email address is fine. Doesn't matter if it's the work email or not, though.
That's a very good point. I was just thinking as you were talking, I'm like thinking, wait, what if I used this personal email address in like gaming websites and like Tumblr and I don't know what, like, so I think it's very important to remember what is this email address usually used for. And of course, you wouldn't want an email address that makes you kind of, I think maybe the best thing to do and the safest way to go about this is to really use just your first name and last name or something like that, versus, an email address that is kind of just like maybe not really representative of who you are as a prospective like applicant. So
right, like big poker player 12345 at Gmail, maybe don't use that.
Well, I mean, if your application is talking about how successful you were as a poker player.
Well, there you go. There you go. Yeah, exactly. Cool. So yeah, so
You got to be very careful about that. I'm so sorry about the background. Just have some maintenance work going on in the apartment. So I'm so sorry about the background, but this is a casual conversation. So anything can happen. Some people have kids in the background, some people have dogs. So, okay. All right. So let's go over just really every single kind of aspect of this application. So first of all, we start with the your bio, right? So your name, birth information, citizenship, right? Your primary address, your contact information, your phone number. So a number that you can be accessible at. So that's very important. And then your communication preferences. So, these are little details that, I think it's always important to touch on. Scott, do you think if I don't check this box, it would make me look less interested in Wharton's program, for example?
It's a very good question, right? And this kind of takes me back to demonstrated interest across programs. It's not a level playing field. Some schools evaluate this. They'll evaluate the number of sessions that you've gone to, the number of students that you've talked with. If you don't show interest, you won't be able to get in. Wharton is actually not one of those programs. So honestly, if you check it or don't check it, it's not like not checking it will mean you get rejected. But I recommend checking it. Why not? I mean, even if it's not going to lead to a rejection, why would you not want to get invited to events, to know about things, deadlines, maybe the questions sometimes change even. I had one year where Wharton released the questions, and I love Wharton and their whole admissions team. And one year, the length changed actually a little bit after they released the questions. So you want to get these types of updates.
Absolutely. Great points over here. So yeah, so of course here you have to choose the program that you're interested in. In this case, we are walking you through the MBA application. You can look at, information on the website over here. Excuse me. For the next page. Okay, so in here we're talking about like if you have the intent to pursue a dual degree. Let me actually zoom in. Maybe this is better. Wow, this is a lot better. Okay. Okay, so if you have the intent to pursue a dual degree program, is there anything that you want to say about that, Scott, here?
Yeah, and this is sort of bordering on some advice, but that's fine. I'm here. Is that sure. Do what is right for you and you think it makes sense for you and your application. So if you are a good candidate for a dual degree, then you should apply. Some people say, is it easier? Is it harder? I would think more so what makes sense for you, right? So the person that, really doesn't make sense to, apply for, design or nursing or something, let's not do it. But if that's you, then you should do it. And then it might actually, make more sense for you to check it versus not. So it's really just kind of yes, it makes sense, or no, it doesn't make sense for you. And then there's, there are programs, of course, but even within Wharton, like the healthcare management, but anyway, we can get into that later.
Yes. Okay, great. So have you previously applied to Wharton, right? So if it's no, if you're a new applicant, it's a no, of course. If you are a reapplicant, so which program did you apply to, right? What was the previous applicant's decision? So it's really important to be honest here and just, they have your record. So there's no way to kind of just go around that. So they have all of that. So just, just kind of really be honest about that. Okay. Yeah. So your demographic, military, right? Excuse me, your languages. So do we list English here or do we not list? Because there's other applications where they're kind of like, well, if you speak English other than English, add it here. But do we list English here or not if you speak it?
So yeah, so if you scroll up a little bit to the top, so language, so here please list your native language. So if your native language is English, then you would not have to list it under language 1. But in this case, native language is Arabic, and then you also speak English, then yes, you would want to list English. And it might seem, sort of, most people were speaking right. English in order to apply to school, but it is something that's worth mentioning. And that way they can see the level. Why not? Let's add it in. And the other thing about languages is just the more the better, right? But just be honest. You never know.
Yes.
So sometimes people will write something and then if they happen to be talking to somebody in admissions or an interview and they might get a couple questions in French, and if you wrote fluent and you can't answer these French questions, maybe that's not a good
yes
place.
Yes, I had we were doing an HBS application walkthrough just a few days ago with Maria, and Maria mentioned something. She was like, thankfully, when I added Spanish, my interviewer was like speaking to me in Spanish, and we were able to communicate. But in my case, for example, and I mentioned this earlier, like before in another session, but I speak like 3 words in Swedish. I speak a little bit of Swedish, so it's not really, you don't really even, it doesn't even qualify for beginner because,
Correct.
so
Right. Well,
just be
that
careful.
right. That sounds like my French, right? So a few words, but not enough that I would.
Right. I found this to be interesting here, Scott. If you speak languages other than English, you may be interested in the Lauder Institute joint degree program, right? Do you want to say anything about that over here?
Sure. Yeah. So I love Lauder. Lauder's great. This is a marketing ploy for Wharton, let's say, to advertise Lauder a little bit more. So when I was at Wharton, I lived in this building, 1,500 Locust, and on my hallway it was everybody, the Wharton student except for one couple. And there were some Lauder friends in the hall, and they had a great time. We send people to Lauder every year. I'm a big fan of the program. Definitely want to look into it and see if that interests you. It's a more intensive offering. You're starting a little bit earlier. You're also getting a master's degree. You're really focusing on, a particular language and often, region and work within that. So it's something that's, specific, and that's why they sort of call that out. If you do speak another language and you want to really explore that further, Lauder might be right for you. So happy to talk to anybody offline about Lauder. But I'm usually pro when it comes up from an applicant. I'm usually, pro thinking about it for that in that circumstance.
Great. Okay. All right. So your parents' information, guardian information, your spouse, your partner,
And if
right?
I could jump in about
Yeah.
parents, because sometimes applicants have questions on this, and I get
Yes.
every year questions from some clients about
Go ahead.
parents. It might seem obvious, but just fill out whatever it is, right? And don't think too much about it. Sometimes people say, well, will it matter if they're working? If they're just kind of collecting information, and on a whole, they're looking at everything. So for instance, let's say somebody comes from a very disadvantaged background. Parents didn't go to high school, and then they've gone and they're the top of their class at Princeton, right? That's going to tell a picture and a story. That doesn't mean that if your father is working or mother is working in private equity as a partner that you won't get accepted, but it's in some ways that could then help you, because now you have the strong PE network that Wharton might want to tap into. So you never know where it's going to be helpful. So don't think too much about it, but definitely fill in all the information.
Yes, very good points, because I think some of us also, like, if your parent is working like a certain job that you maybe feel that it's not kind of Wharton kind of level or whatever it is, you're kind of okay, you're trying to like make it even nicer, in a way, like add a little bit, add a little bit of words or whatever. But I think it's really important to just be honest about everything and be proud, right? I mean, this is an application that represents you, right? So it's very important to put the correct information. So yes, perfect. Okay, so spouse, partner, over here, children. Maybe they should add a section for pets in here. I need to,
There you go.
I need to let Wharton know. Okay. Okay, university relations. So over here is, if you have any, so Scott, if you have any family affiliation to Wharton, do you have advantage more than like me, for example, who doesn't have family affiliation to Wharton?
Yes. It's not the same advantage as like legacy might be for undergrad. There's more of an impact in undergraduate if your parent went to the school. It's a little bit easier to get in, but it is better. And what's also helpful is if a spouse is either at the school now, or even more important, if they're also applying. We work with a lot of couples and give a couples discount too for anybody out there. And so sometimes you see, one applicant is stronger than the other, and that's an internal discussion that I don't like to get involved in. But let's say that is the fact where one is stronger than the other, and you list that you're applying together because they might not know, maybe the name's not the same. It's potentially helpful for the weaker applicant to get in if they like the stronger one and they think, okay, if we take both, then we're more likely to take them. That does count as well. So either a current applicant, or certainly if you have a family member that went to the school, it is going to help you if you write down that information.
I always love those stories where it's like you see on LinkedIn a post of like a couple who got into like Wharton or got into whatever. It's actually, I always wonder, I'm like, wow, they're both like accomplished. And, so that's very impressive, because going through this application and having the kind of profile that gets you into Wharton is not something to really, take lightly. It's very difficult to get into Wharton. So very impressive profiles out there. And you heard it from the GMAT Club session here that Scott is willing to give a discount for couples. Okay, great. So community honors recognitions. Okay, this is the part that's like, I think a lot of people really struggle with, because like, what do I add? What do I consider to be a recognition? What do I consider? And I have a few questions from the audience here, but I want to give you the mic to kind of introduce this section.
Sure. Yeah, these are very tricky. In some ways, I wish schools would all align on the number of things that you have to list during college, after college. This is my week. It's like answering a lot of these questions from clients at the end, right? Like, what do we do here? So this is actually well timed. So list any awards, recognitions, honors, and or fellowships, scholarships that you've received in your collegiate or broader personal community. So very, very open-ended for work, right? Anything that you consider that could be some kind of award or honor, you should list. Now, if you're working with somebody on the applications, of course, one of their jobs is to tell you whether it's worth listing. Like, for instance, I worked at Deloitte, and they give out these green dot awards. And it's great to get a green dot award, but it's not very hard, and almost everybody gets them. So I don't know that would be like the first thing that I might list here, whereas if we're the valedictorian or something, that would be helpful. It's hard to give general advice on this because they're so particular, but I would list them in the order of importance. And at the end of the day, if you're really not sure if it's impressive enough, it's probably not, right? Unless you're like super critical of yourself, and maybe you don't need to be that critical, but typically if somebody says, I don't know if this is good enough, 9 times out of 10, it's really not worth writing about. And this is meant for things that are truly going to impress somebody. You don't have to list these. To be honest, I don't think I listed anything here when I applied. And I got in and did really well. So it's not like a requirement. It's more so if you have some of these things that are impressive that you want to communicate, this is the place to do it.
Perfect. So we have a question from the audience. What should we add in professional work section promotion? So can we add published papers or white papers?
Awards, recognitions, honors, or fellowships, college. It's a good question. I would probably lean towards no. I mean, you can. It's very open-ended, but I would lean towards no. I don't think publishing a paper is necessarily a recognition, although you do have to. Yeah, that's definitely a tricky one. I think to be safe and cover it, you could list it, but if it's like one or two, but I wouldn't list a whole 12 different publications or something. But if it's like one you got into, Nature journal for medicine, there's like a really good one, then maybe I would include that.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, I think about it. Maybe if you published a paper and it got, mentioned in like a major publication or a major journal or something like that, or it had maybe like a lot of views or it went viral or something, maybe I would say, but right. So that's a tricky one, definitely. Okay, so extracurricular activities, community engagement, that's also one, that I'm pretty sure, like, I mean, when I was applying just recently, I had a difficult time here as well. Positions held, club organization. In the brief description, what do I mention, right? So what do you want to say about that, Scott, here?
Sure. Yeah, so first of all, pay attention to the number here, right? So Wharton is up to 5. All schools are not up to 5, right? So this requires you to narrow down to 5 if you have more. List them in the order of importance. And when I say importance, I mean, let's say somebody is reading, and everybody's human. And by the time you get down to the last bullet for the 5th one, let's focus on the best ones at first for number 1. So your best activity, the most leadership goes up top. Organization name, if there's the name, National Association of, XYZ. If there's not, like, you could write mentor. Don't make up a name if there's not one. It could just be mentor, and then you talk about how you are mentoring, girls in math or something like that. As far as positions, you're just sort of listing the titles. I mean, the size, rough estimate is fine. This is not an exact number, but they sort of just want to get a sense for, what that looks like. And like you said, led 5 students, X and Y. I think a couple sentences is good here. And the reason why this is a nice section to fill out is because on the resume, you just have a brief chance to list an activity, whereas this, you can really talk about the impact. So focus as much as you can on impact here. What did you do? Who did you work with? What were the results? And I think that's important. So when it's brief description, it's not the description of the organization that's as important, although certainly some of that is helpful too for context, but more so like, what did you do? What was your kind of impact? Average number of hours per week always stumps people because this might not be a consistent, 2-hour weekly activity. If it's some summer fundraisers that you spend 20 hours a week for 3 weeks or something, just average that, right? That's why I say average. Just take it over 52 weeks and then kind of divide that.
Okay, perfect. So someone just asked a question about what if I had, so it's about volunteer work. I'm thinking actually this isn't in here in this section. I think this is in this section or maybe the work. Okay, we'll see, but let's ask a question. So Shubham is asking, what if I had volunteered in my organization as well as with an NGO, but I do not have proper documents to prove it? Should I still mention it? And will that be fine?
Sure. So there's no requirement to have certificates or documents for volunteer activities. I know in some countries, I know in India, they had to have that. We have a lot of clients in India, lots of clients that ask this question. That's not a requirement. As long as it happened, and you're fine. And they say up to 5, you don't have to list 5, right? It's like with anything, with word counts for essays or any of this, write what's going to be, don't write something just to fill it in. If you have 3 great activities, and then 4 and 5 are like really not impressive, don't put them there just to fill it in. You're much better off just having 2 or 3 good ones.
I think that's a very good point because, as an applicant, you look at these boxes. I remember like when I left a box empty, I would just get a lot of anxiety. I'm like, I have to go back and write something. I have to, So as you mentioned, when you said achievements, like you didn't put anything in there. So don't feel the need to put something that's not really true to you. So if it happened, add it in there because it's really just about the quality of those, like, of the content that you add and the value that you bring, the value that it brings to your overall application. So just don't feel the need to add things just because, especially if they're not required, right? So if it's just like an optional box. I remember like, I told you, like when I see boxes, I just feel like I have to write something.
Well, okay. And funny enough, it can work against you. Very much so. So when I say better off leaving it blank, I mean, really better off because a lot of this is judgment. And if you're going to write down something that's really just not, I play poker with my friends every Saturday night or something. And that's sort of a joke. I don't think anybody would actually write that, but like, that's just going to make you look bad. You should have known not to write that here.
You'd be surprised how many people think that. Hey, it really depends on how you view poker as like every Saturday activity.
Well, and we've had clients that have been professional poker players too, so that's different. So in that case, that is relevant.
Yes, absolutely. So over here, so if you were placed on probation, so just really giving a quick example here. So for example, in my situation, I was placed on academic probation. I remember I had a car accident, broke my jaw and all of that. And my grades went like, I remember a semester, it was all D's and I had an F, I remember even. And then I went from like D's to F. And then the semester after it was all A's. So, an outcome who's viewing your application and your transcript is looking at it and trying to analyze everything saying, wait, she got like F's here and D's, but then like all of a sudden, like all A's, what happened? So I think it's really important to leave no questions to the adcom or make them like kind of assume things. I think it's really important to address it here and mention, like in my case, I said I was under academic, I was under academic probation from this semester to this semester, and these are the reasons, right? So that's kind of what I did.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, totally agree. The only thing I would add here is less is more with the explanation. And that's super, super important. So notice they give you 1,500 characters. Don't even think about going anywhere near that 1,500 characters. That's a long piece of writing. So less is more. The idea is to explain it factually. This is what happened.
Yes.
This is what I'm doing now, and this is why I'm still going to be strong. That kind of thing. So very brief. And then, to be honest here, I know this might seem obvious to most of you. I would say probably a large majority of you. But I do get questions from some people. Well, it's not here. Well, so you don't want something to come up in a background check later. So if it happened, right? And it's better to just write about it.
Yes, absolutely. And if for some reason you forgot to write about it, I don't think you will, because usually that's kind of something that sticks with you and you remember it all the time and you worry about it. But if you forget about it, I think it's, important to send an email to the ATCOM, to the admissions office, and just mention, hey, I forgot to mention this, right? Type of thing, and just kind of add a PDF or whatever. Yeah, so great. Okay, let's move on. I know the fun section is coming, which is the essays. Okay. All right. So the resume over here, is there anything, I'm pretty sure you have a thing or two to say about the resume, Scott.
Yeah. So, well, let me start with this box here, because I just answered this question for folks yesterday. Number of years of full-time work experience, and they say to use whole numbers, right? So this is different, because sometimes people, well, not sometimes, I mean, always people want to be exact, and some schools will use the decimal. So if it's 4.7 years, you write 5 years, and don't worry that it's not actually 5 years, it's 4.7, that's fine. That's what they're looking for. And this is upon matriculation, which it states here, but that's by the time you start school. So that's not the number of years now. As far as the resume in general, I mean, I'll give a few points. I can talk for an hour about a resume, so I'll just be very, very brief. But the resume, it should be a one-page resume, no exceptions for a full-time program. If you're doing an executive program, you could do more than one, up to two. Full-time is one page. That's a hard rule. And this is a basic standard business resume. We're not having your picture. We're not having different boxes and outlines. It's a standard, experience and education and extracurriculars, leadership, have some kind of interests, skills, that type of thing. And the resume can overlap other things in all these short answers. And that's, I would say, the most common question that I get about all this stuff is, well, it's in my resume, do I also write it here? And the answer is yes, you do. So the resume is not supposed to be, mutually exclusive, right? It's covering everything you want in the resume. And then if you have these personal activities, they should also be written about in the application as well. So those are just a few top thoughts for the resume.
Perfect. So for the total number of years, and you mentioned that earlier, so it needs to start like after you graduated, like your undergrad, right? So you start, okay. Right. So post undergrad, right? Okay. Because,
post undergrad, yeah. And that's a good question. There are some, everyone has a different circumstance. If you have a circumstance and you're not sure, email scott@personalmbacoach.com. Happy to answer some questions. But typically experience in college doesn't count. If you want to make an argument for it in your case, maybe you can, but yes, typically that's post-college.
Well, what about non-traditional applicants like me? I started college, I did my undergrad 4 or 5 years after high school, actually, because I was working. I kind of wanted to explore what my options were and what I wanted to go to college for. So, for, I guess we would consider that like a non-traditional applicant, right? Because you didn't go to like, right.
Yeah. So you would be one of the people emailing me, right? And then I would say, yes, in that case,
just email me.
I mean, we have clients. I had a client who's a plumber. So age 18, started doing plumbing. Father was a plumber. Worked as a plumber for a number of years. Then
Love,
started a plumbing business on his own, and started
love it.
college at like the age of 29. So ended up doing really well getting into M7 schools. But yes, so that work experience started from age 18. In that case, it wasn't from age 31 when they graduated from college.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So again, personal circumstances, everyone has different, a different story to tell, right? Okay, great. So area of interest after MBA. Okay. So what if I have a little bit of an idea, but I'm not really sure, like, what do I do
Right.
here?
Yeah, and this is a common question, right? And maybe even another question is, what if my area isn't here? These things are not perfect. They don't cover everything. I would select something to the best of your knowledge that you feel like is most accurate and most logical with respect to the rest of your application, right? And that's what's most important here. So you have your post-MBA goals, your area of interest should probably align with those goals to some extent. So just pick something. It doesn't matter, honestly, that much. This is mostly a data gathering exercise. So I would just kind of pick what's going to make the most sense for you.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Great. So someone asked here, and this is a great intro for our next section, which is like, the recent employer, current most recent employer. So someone asked, well, Scott, do we have to work or have experience in a multinational company, MNC, like a Fortune 500? Like, how do schools evaluate people who don't come from well-known companies?
Right. Yeah. So you don't have to have anything to apply to business school. I mean, there are certain companies that might be more feeder companies. If you are at McKinsey and McKinsey sends a certain number of people to Wharton every year, you know that there are slots that are kind of earmarked for you, right? But that doesn't mean that if you're at, mom and pop ABC consultancy in your home country that you won't get accepted. So there are spots for different people. There's benefits to small versus large. If you're in a small organization, you probably have more responsibility. You're probably doing a lot more. If you're in a large company, you're likely not, doing everything in the organization, selling, designing, marketing, admin. Maybe you are in a smaller place. So you just want to represent what you have and try to use that to the best of your advantage. And this is where the storytelling, right, and the essay guidance comes in. I know we're not getting into that in this conversation, but I don't think too much about this. They just want to know all the details. So, they want to know the, salary and industry and all this stuff and just kind of fill it in. They should be accurate within $1,000 US dollars. So that's just from like a background check standpoint. That's what would trigger an issue. If your salary is $11,000 less than you wrote, that's not good. If there's like an $800 difference, nobody cares.
That's a very good point because so maybe something that a lot of applicants don't know, I didn't know when I applied, is that you go through a verification process right after you get in, right? So make sure that you have all the accurate information in here. And I know a few people who got into like, Wharton and Harvard, and what ended up happening, and they have their own business. What ended up happening, they asked them to prove that even, that this is like a business registered in your country, or like a website or something that will prove that this is actually a business. So very important to remember that you're going to be, everything's going to be verified. So just make sure that everything's accurate in here.
Right. And just to make everybody sleep easy. So, over 15 years doing this, I've never had an honest person get in trouble, like ever. So if you're honest and you're trying to be honest, you'll be fine.
100%. Yes. Yes. Perfect. Okay. So, I think I wanted to mention here, or I think we're good here. Okay, select an employer. Okay, I think we're good here. All right, second most recent employer. Okay, and then, all right. So professional awards, honors, recognitions, we kind of talked a little bit about that. But is there anything that you want to add here, Scott?
No, except that, this is where, so like, please list your most significant professional awards, honors, and/or recognitions you have received. I wouldn't write promotions here. I think the promotion path would be shown on the resume.
Yes.
This is just another kind of honor or award. If you got top 10% performance award for X quarter or something like that. That's the type of thing that should be included here.
Okay, okay. And this is focused on professional awards, not personal.
Correct. Yeah. So this is what did the company give you essentially?
Okay, okay, perfect. So that's very important to emphasis on the word professional. Okay, and then there is so here link to upload your resume. Please format and answer the questions as they're asked above. Okay, additional employment information. So this is kind of a section if you want to add additional employment information, but you do it through another document like a PDF, right? Because there's not enough space in here, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It's not something that's commonly used, but
because it's one page. Yeah, because it's one page, right? Okay. Certifications. So, I think a lot of people here worry that if I don't check anything here and just say no, how am I going to look like do I have to actually go get a CPA or CFA, whatever, before I apply to Wharton, right? Like, what do you say to these people?
Right. So you absolutely don't have to do that, right? They're just collecting information. If you are a CFA charter holder and you went through all those studies and you did series 1, series 2, series 3, that's a lot of work. And let's give you some credit for that because they know how hard that is. But sorry, level 1, level 2, a little jet lag. Level 3, but if you don't worry about it. Again, I have none of these. I have never taken any of those. I've done a lot of work. You did M&A consulting, and so I can analyze a lot of deals and went to Wharton and all that, but I don't actually have those, and that's fine. So either you have it or you don't have it. Don't think too much about it. And honestly, It doesn't make a huge difference. So if you're like on the border, do I do level 3? If you don't want to do it for yourself, don't do it for a client. It's way more work than the credit you actually get.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're moving on to maybe just the last question here that we have about work experience. I work in a company and I also help actively in our family business. What should I mention in the employer column?
Yeah, and it's funny. I had that question from a client in India over the weekend that is in this situation.
Maybe
so
it's the same
kind
client.
of like, yeah, maybe hey, how are you? So, it actually should, the fields could be changed, honestly, because it doesn't allow you to have 2 current employers. So you might just want to write this somewhere else. You might want to put an end date of, future posted date or try to type in zeros or something, right, to show. Somehow you want to communicate that you're doing 2 things. And even if you put an older date in the previous employer, then you could write in the description, still working at family business, 10 hours a week. That's definitely something you want to get credit for. We have a lot of family business clients that we work with. Had 2 calls just today alone, and it's something that I think is relevant if that's you and if you have a lot of contributions to your business. So even if there's like a manual thing you need to write in the description to kind of overrule their technical limitations, that's fine to do as well.
I think it also depends, Scott, on what's your level of involvement, right? Like, are you kind of like passing by the family office to kind of just volunteer your time an hour or 2 a day, or are you actually really working and you're actively working? Like, what's the dedication that you are, because, I guess that's how you make a difference between like a job or volunteering or helping kind of thing, right?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. That's right. And that's one of those subjective evaluations that you need to think about, but absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, perfect. Moving on to academic background, and I think there's a lot of questions here, but so what's going on here? I come from India, or I come from Kuwait, or I come from France, or and my school is not the same as the American school system, and my GPA is completely different. Like, it's not 4.0. What do I do?
Sure. Yeah. So if you scroll down a little bit here, so here you have name, city, country, start date, end date, degree received, and they write here, and this is something that I wish everybody read like before starting any application, because we get so many questions, so many inquiries about, my GPA from, from BITS Pilani is converted to X. Don't ever convert anything, ever, 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 unless the school requires you to do so. So there is no conversion. Wes does not do anything for me at all. I don't ever use it. So when they say here, do not convert to a 4.0 system, right? So they just want to know you relative to others in your school. So just came back from London. So in the UK, it would be, 2-1, 1-1, first honors, whatever it is. So don't worry about converting. Converting will just make things confusing. And they just want to know where you are relative to others in your class. And so if the highest scorer, if the topper of your class got a 76 and you're freaking out because you got a 75, which looks bad in the US, that's very good because the topper was a 76. And we know the topper's a 76 because we know your schools, most likely. And if you don't think we know your school because it's a small school, you don't think people apply to, you could certainly write that somewhere here, what the topper was and kind of where you were. So that's what I'd say about the GPA. And hopefully that makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah, I know a lot of applicants who convert because they want to they think they're making it easier on the business schools, but it's not really easier. And then remember, the people who are reading, your applications are humans, and they've gone through thousands of applicants, and from every single country, maybe countries that you've never even heard of. So they know, they're aware, they're trained to do that. So it's really important to not convert, as Scott mentioned. Okay, so going here, of course, high school, very straightforward over here. So academic honors and awards. Again, emphasis on academic, of course, honors and awards. What are some of maybe things that, like maybe an example or two of like something that I would write in here?
Yeah, something like National Honor Society would be one.
Dean's List.
Valedictorian, top, you won a science competition or an essay writing competition, something like that.
Okay, perfect. Would you consider, I don't know if this is considered an honor and an award. Is there like, what is that called in the US? Like when you participate, like there's like this team that you participate in. I forgot the name of it, but the Scout or something Scout, like something Scout, what is that called?
Oh, Boy Scouts?
Is that like an honor and award or something if
like
you participate?
Outside, like nature hiking kind of thing?
Because we have that in Kuwait, and they're very selective on the Girl Scouts.
Yeah, I think this gets down to subjective. I think in the US that would not be an academic honor award, but maybe in other markets it is, and academia is tied more to that. That's pretty much kind of a region by region.
Okay. I mentioned that in my application. I was so proud, and then I found out that in America they don't really care so much.
Well, but things are different in all markets, right? So
yes, absolutely. Okay, great. All right. So other post-secondary degrees. So what do you want to say about this part in here?
Yeah. So again, just fill in what you have. You can't skip anything. It might be obvious, but I get the questions. Well, this degree wasn't really relevant. It doesn't matter. You have to account for everything that you've done, everything, and so you have to write it. And the grades are not super relevant for masters. They're really looking at the undergraduate and the bachelor's performance, which maybe you're happy to hear that, maybe you're not happy to hear that, but that's kind of what it is. So just fill it in. And that's pretty much the only thing that I would say there. If you don't have any degrees, that's great. You don't have to have any degree. Having more degrees doesn't help you to get into school. So if you don't have any degrees and you're thinking, oh, that's fine, like you don't need anything. It's just more so if you do, they want to capture that.
Okay, yeah, I think, would you add community college here? Because that's a path that a lot of international students I went through this path when I came to the US in 2010. I did community college because it's like less expensive, and I did it for 2 years, and then I transferred to University of San Francisco. So like, would you add community college in this section?
Exactly, yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so moving on, additional college information. So intended major while at Wharton. again, they do mention it over here. The expected major is not binding, right? So it's okay to put something, and then as you evolve at Wharton, which probably you will, because there's going to be a lot of growth, personal growth, and you're going to be influenced by a lot of maybe clubs or students or even professors, and maybe you're going to find your passion in something else. So that's why they probably mentioned that it's not binding, correct?
Yeah, and the only exception is the healthcare management program. So if you're applying to HTM, that is binding, that is 100% binding, you cannot change. And so you should be sure that that's your course of action. And you'll have a conversation with June. If you don't know about June, you'll definitely get to meet her through this process. So that is the other, or rather the only exception. But otherwise, yes, the major is not super important. But again, have it be relevant to your story and goals to some extent. So what you're learning from that major should help you to succeed a little bit in your desired post-MBA career.
Okay, I'm going to try to make this quick because we have two important sections in here and we have another maybe 10 or 11 minutes here. So the recommendation letters, of course, like your recommenders, right? So would you say that the best way to go about this is to make sure that it's someone that you report to? Because what if you have only one manager? What if it's one person that you report to? What would you do in that case? Or if you come from an entrepreneurial background, who writes your recommendation letter?
Right. Yeah, so again, quick answers here. We have many presentations on our website, personalmbacoach.com. Feel free to watch them. We talk about recommendations for many slides, and there's a lot of free intel and stuff that you can get there. But to answer those questions, the best person is someone who's going to be able to write specific things about you, who's going to write good things, right? The bar is really high. I was doing an interview for another magazine this morning, and this topic came up. And I said, look, it's like, even if your recommendation is like pretty good, that's horrible in my mind, because everybody gets a great letter, almost everybody. And so pick someone who's going to write really good things about you, and they're going to be specific, and they will be able to compare you to others and give a lot of detail. So if you're an entrepreneur, you could have an investor, you could have an advisor, you could have a client, you could have a customer. If none of those make sense to you, shoot me a message, and happy to try to help. But we have a lot of entrepreneurs. Same thing with family businesses. Like, you can't have mom or dad write this. So nobody that's a family member. And so then you have to think about someone else. In some cases, it's an extracurricular involvement. If I'm on the National Association of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the head really sees me work in a different dimension. Let's say I'm a trader and I trade equities all day or something. And that's, one part of my brain. And then this other stuff that I'm doing outside of work shows me another part. That could be one. Nobody from college at all, with no exceptions, unless that person happens to be working at a company that is also managing, where they're managing you now, but no professors or anything like that for the standard 2-year full-time MBA program.
Yeah, great advice. And of course, if you want to hear more, you could definitely go to Personal MBA Coach website. A client is actually a really good one for entrepreneurs. A client is a really good one, especially if you have a very strong relationship with them and they know you very well and they've been kind of dealing with you for a while. So that's a really good one, definitely. Okay, so lastly, we want to go over the essays, and that's the fun part in here. And we have a good 9 minutes here. So let's talk about the essays, Scott.
Sure. So a couple of things to note here. One is Wharton has a hard word count. As you can see here, you're pasting your answer in here. So it can't be, 520 words. That's not the case for all schools, but for Wharton it is. With this first essay, and this is, again, very brief. We also have webinars talking about essays and essay analysis. We have M7 downloadable book that you can get access to tips for how to approach essays. So a lot more. But here, this is going to be more of that straightforward goals. So, how do you plan to use Wharton to help achieve your future professional goals? So what have you done? What are your goals? How is Wharton going to guide you through that process? And really showing them the knowledge of the program would be important. Talking about classes and clubs and speaker series and that sort of thing. If you're watching this now, you're applying right on, you probably already wrote your essays. But that's the brief bit about Wharton, and definitely, again, more on our website, or of course, if you work with us, much more. Taking into consideration your background, personal, professional, and or academic. So pay attention to the and or. You don't have to talk about everything. This is designed to be outside of the resume outside of maybe that first essay. So tell them something else about you. How are you going to make specific, meaningful contributions to the Wharton community? And this is where you want to show them your knowledge of Wharton, and also at the same time, show them what kind of leadership things you've done in the past, especially if it didn't make it into any of the earlier sections. This is your chance to talk about some leadership, and then say, maybe based on what you've learned from that or your experience, how are you going to contribute? And try to be well-rounded here. So the idea is not, let's say you're working in real estate, you don't want to write everything about real estate in your real estate profession. Let's maybe show them something a little bit different. And then for the reapplicant essay, 250 words, pretty straightforward. What's different? So you just want to list these things. If things are not different, don't write about them, right? So you don't have to have more volunteer experience, more courses, a job promotion, higher test score. Like, you don't need all of these things. But what of those items are different, and how have you improved, and reflect on that. So that's my kind of 2-minute essay overview.
Okay, perfect. Scott, this is great. I would say, just to make it short from my end, and maybe Scott, you can kind of either, tell me if I'm right or wrong, but what Wharton can do for you. And I think this is a section where you are required to do a lot of research on Wharton. And I think also a lot of students think that just listing classes or just like name dropping, or things like that, it's not. It needs to be relevant to like your experience and what you want to achieve. And I think this is where you do a lot of research about Wharton and attend those events and talk to students and just do all of that, right? This is where they see that you're actually very much, interested in Wharton, and you've done your research, and you can see how Wharton fits like your professional goals, your post MBA goals. For the second section is what you could do for Wharton. I guess it's more about like how you can add value to Wharton, I guess, right? And then of course, for the reapplicant essay, as you've mentioned, I would say the additional information section, and you can tell me here also what you think, but I would say this is where you can address like really weaknesses in your profile, right? So for my case, for example, I have a low GPA, right? Like, why? Right. So maybe just kind of mentioning that what ended up happening. I did mention that I was really homesick and I was away from my family. And I come from a culture where we're very family oriented. And I moved to America. It was a culture shock for me, and just things that really affected you, right? And things that you perceive as like weak in your application, or things that you want to address.
Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing that I would add here under the additional information is that most of the time it's not used. And I want to be clear, because sometimes people feel, oh, this is optional additional, let me figure out what I should write for 500 words. That's not the objective. The objective is, if there is something that you need to mention, then you mention it here. But like what I mentioned with the other optional, definitely be brief, be specific, and targeted. So a lot of people don't have, like, I wrote nothing in my additional information. A lot of people don't write anything. If there is something that impacted you, this is your chance to write about it here, if it didn't fit anywhere else. But if not, you can certainly leave it out.
Okay, we're going to make this really quick as we're wrapping up. For the test information, of course, this is where you add your scores. We have a question about this section here, and that is coming from Thomas. Thomas is saying, I took the GMAT before the GRE, but I did not like my score. Do I have to select that I took the GMAT, or do I have to reveal that I took the GMAT even if I'm relying on my GRE? I would prefer not to share the GMAT score. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, so we get a lot of these questions. So Wharton actually considers a final score as a score that has all of the sections and is not canceled. So if you void the score and you cancel it and you don't have the AWA, in Wharton's eyes, that's not a completed test. Now, that is different for every school. Some schools consider every sit as an attempt. So that's one thing. But if you took the test, you have a score, it's all done, yes, then you would be reporting it here. Even if it's not a score that you like, it is a score that you have. And if you have all the sections and you took it, then you would want to report it here just to be complete. But they evaluate the highest, score. And so if you have a great, GRE score, like they'll look at that. So that's sort of my answer on the test.
Yeah, I wouldn't see it. It's crazy. Like, if I was doing this, I would probably, if I didn't like my score, I wouldn't add it. But it's crazy. Like you're saying, well, if it's, you have to report it if it's actually a score. So you have to report it in here, even if it's not a score that you like. That's a
Yeah.
little,
And
yeah, that's a little scary for an applicant.
sure. Well, if anything else, it shows growth, and as well with the number of times. Some people are concerned about
I
I've
agree.
taken the test 3 or 4 times. What does that mean? It means you're dedicated and you tried.
I
The worst
agree.
thing is to see an applicant that has a low score and they took it one time. That
Mhm.
sends a clear signal to admissions. I just don't really care that much. Or maybe there's another personal
Yes.
circumstance, but taking it multiple times shows that you've actually tried and you improved, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and in the case of the student who asks a question, if you report your GMAT and then you don't like it, but your GRE is better, like you said, it shows that, okay, maybe the GMAT is not for me, but I even tried with the GRE, so I tried, right? Okay, great. I think we are done, right? Over here is like language skill assessment. Um, I don't think this is something that we need to address, but this should include circumstance where you speak, read, write in English. Is there anything that you want to say about this section, Scott?
No, I think that's pretty straightforward if you follow the
Yeah, I
directions.
think so too. I think so too. Well, Scott, I'm going to give you the mic to give the last word here. But before I do, throughout the application, they do mention that they have an MBA application checklist and prerequisite requirement on the website of Wharton. So you can go here if you're kind of needing more information about any section. And yeah, Scott, feel free to take the mic and conclude
Great.
this conversation.
Well, Dalal, yes, thank you for walking us through everything. Everybody, best of luck. I know some of you are watching this and you're already finished your applications or just about done. We do offer group mock interviews, and we have former Wharton mock interviewers. So in case you want interview prep, let us know. Obviously, if you want help with the whole application, happy to have a consultation offline. Just shoot me an email at Scott, SCOTT, at personalmbacoach.com. And wish everybody the best of luck with all their applications. Stay well, and thank you again for having me here.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, for coming. I really appreciate you, and we'll see you next year. Next year,
Great.
next year again with the same webinar. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate you. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Scott. Take care.